It is February 1971. Three men are flying home from the moon. They have been gone 12 days. They're tired in a way that has no ordinary name. The tiredness of having done something no human being was built to do and survived it. The spacecraft rotates slowly, a quarter turn every few minutes, to keep the sunlight distributed evenly across the hall. Through the window, the universe rotates past. Earth, moon, sun, stars. Earth, moon, sun, stars. One of the three men keeps watching. His name is Edgar Mitchell. He has a PhD from MIT. He flew combat aircraft off aircraft carriers. He survived the test pilot program at Patuxent River, where they flew things that had never been flown before and sometimes did not come back. He is not a man who confuses feelings for facts. And then, looking out that window at the Earth and the stars and the silence between them, something happens to him. Not a feeling, a knowing. Sudden, complete, and irreversible. He described it later as the most important moment of his life, more important than the moon. He came home, he tried to explain what had happened to him, and then he spent the next 45 years saying something that cost him everything his career had built, and saying it anyway, every time someone asked, until the day he died.
So to really understand this mystery, we have to build the man, right? Edgar Dean Mitchell, he started out as just a boy, lying on his back in the high desert dark of Artesia, New Mexico. Just picture it. Big sky, flat horizon, the kind of absolute silence that literally demands questions. And he answered that silence with relentless, borderline obsessive education. He grabs a bachelor's from Carnegie Mellon in 1952, then an MIT doctorate by 1964. See, he didn't just want to fly airplanes, he wanted to know how the entire universe operated at its base level. And he took that absolute hunger to Patuxent River as a Navy test pilot. The curriculum there? Yeah, it was pretty simple. Step into a machine that's never been flown and find out if it kills you. Surviving that required a mind that could stay incredibly cold, observant, and precise when everything around you goes wrong. NASA definitely noticed. In 1966, they pulled him into Group 5. He backed up Apollo 10, he backed up Apollo 13. Every single choice he made aimed him like an arrow toward a window 239,000 miles from Earth.
Apollo 14 launches on January 31st, 1971. 5 days later, Edgar Mitchell steps out onto the Fra Highlands and becomes the sixth human being to walk on the moon. He spent 9 hours and 17 minutes out there. Now put yourself on that surface for a second. You look up, the sky isn't dark blue. It's absolute, total, unfiltered black. The sun is burning bright, sure, but all around it is just the void. And hanging right there in the middle of that blackness is the Earth. This living, breathing sphere of white clouds, blue oceans, and brown continents. Mitchell stood under that black sky staring at our planet and realized for the very first time what home actually meant. He felt this deep biological longing for its chaos, its water, its air. It was this unbelievably profound grounding moment, right at the literal apex of human achievement. Now, here's where we hit the core tension inside Edgar Mitchell. On one hand, you've got him flawlessly executing authorized NASA procedures, collecting rocks, deploying these highly calibrated seismic instruments. But on the other hand, in the margins of his tight schedule, he was actually running an unauthorized, completely secret ESP experiment. He was literally attempting to transmit card symbols telepathically to receivers back on Earth. I mean, think about that for a second. He is standing on the lunar surface, one of only 14 humans to ever do so at that point, and he's quietly running a consciousness experiment on the side. Obviously, NASA was not exactly thrilled when they eventually found out, but man, it tells you exactly who this guy was. The hardcore scientific hunger and the intense spiritual hunger lived inside the exact same brain. The moon simply dragged them both out into the light.
So, the 3-day journey home. That is what changed everything. Imagine being trapped in a command module, roughly the size of a large car. The systems are just humming around you. And the barbecue roll, the slow spin of the spacecraft to manage heat, is constantly exposing you to the entire universe out the window. That is where it hit him. The writer Frank White later coined this the overview effect. It's a highly documented psychological shift. You see the planet whole, just suspended in absolutely nothing. National borders vanish. Political conflicts suddenly look ridiculous. The sheer fragility of this tiny blue dot becomes a physical weight in your chest. Now, for most astronauts, it's an incredibly intense emotional response. But for Mitchell? Oh, it went much further. It completely broke the boundaries of his reality.
He experienced what ancient Sanskrit calls samadhi. It was this instant, direct perception of cosmic unity. Mitchell essentially realized that the molecules in his own body, the metal of the spacecraft, and the burning stars outside were all forged in the exact same cosmic furnace. And to him, this wasn't just pretty poetry, it was a physical knowing. He actually spent the next 3 days testing himself. He looked for a CO2 imbalance, checked for oxygen deprivation. He applied all of his intense MIT rigor, trying to find the mechanical glitch in his own brain. And he found nothing. It's fascinating because decades later, modern neuroscience would point to something called the default mode network. That's the part of our brain responsible for our sense of a bounded self. When that network quiets down, the boundary between you and the universe literally dissolves. Mitchell had a massive, completely unprovoked neurobiological shift in deep space. He landed back on Earth, a permanently changed man.
But Mitchell absolutely refused to let this experience just become a dusty memory. He wanted data. So he founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences in 1973, which was just 2 years after he got back. Noetic comes from the Greek word for mind. He literally built an entire organization to apply rigorous scientific methods to consciousness, meditation, and the mind-matter connection. And how did mainstream academia react? They immediately marginalized him. They essentially viewed this whole project as evidence that spaceflight had somehow damaged him. But Mitchell, he viewed their skepticism as a massive failure of institutional courage. He spent decades funding and driving peer-reviewed research, desperately trying to find a mathematical language for exactly what he saw out that window.
But look, this science was really only half the story. By the 1990s, Mitchell began speaking very publicly about what his unique, high-level access had revealed to him, and his claims were incredibly specific. He stated that the Earth has been visited by non-human intelligence. He pointed directly to Roswell as a legitimate crash retrieval event. He stated that non-human biological material was absolutely recovered. Now, he never claimed he saw the craft himself. What he claimed was that he was briefed, privately, by high-ranking military and intelligence officials who carried these massive secrets and wanted to tell someone credible before they died. And he stated without any hesitation that a systemic government concealment program had actively hidden this reality from elected officials and the public for decades. The absolutely crucial point here is the cost. Edgar Mitchell wasn't out there selling books. He wasn't trying to build a brand. He was a certified national hero, spending the credibility he had spent a literal lifetime earning. He was mocked. NASA completely distanced itself from him. He was offered so many easy outs. People told him he could just blame the intense stress of space, walk away clean. He refused. He maintained this exact position for 40 years. And actually, this brings us to the end of our 5-part Pentagon UAP explainer arc. If you've been with us through the radar tapes, the congressional hearings, and those declassified memos, seriously, thank you for watching. This specific arc is closing, but our explainer channel definitely isn't. Make sure you hit subscribe because what we're going to cover next will shift your perspective entirely. So the big question is, what do you do with Edgar Mitchell? Throughout this entire 5-part arc, we've looked heavily at institutional evidence, radar, memorandums, sworn oaths. But Mitchell gives us the personal evidence. A man who flew combat missions, passed MIT, and walked on the moon. A guy who had absolutely zero incentive to lie, and literally every reason in the world to just stay quiet. You don't have to instantly believe that crashed craft are sitting in hangars right now, but you kind of can no longer pretend these questions just don't exist. The institutional record is finally catching up to the exact positions Edgar Mitchell occupied completely alone in public at immense personal cost. Edgar Mitchell died on February 4th, 2016. The next morning, February 5th, was the 45th anniversary of the day he stood on the moon. I don't know what that means. I don't think anyone does. But I think about him sometimes, in those last years, in Florida, still answering questions, still saying the same things he'd been saying since 1974, still certain that the universe was not what we'd been told it was. A boy from the New Mexico desert who went to the moon and came back knowing something he could never fully prove and could never stop saying. He deserved better than to be a footnote. Tomorrow we begin something new. Week 7 of the roadmap brings us into a different kind of darkness, the history of secret societies, the groups that have operated in the shadows of power for centuries, shaping events that the history books attribute to other causes. We start with the most famous secret society in the world, or the one everyone thinks they know, the Freemasons. What they actually believe, what they actually do, and what the historical record actually says, as opposed to what 5 centuries of rumor have made of them. See you there.